Hey, good morning, everybody. My name is Lance French. I'm the Business Development Manager for W&M Environmental, a division of Braun Intertech, and I would like to welcome you to our webinar on environmental compliance reporting. Our experts for today are W&M's Nick Foreman. Nick, welcome.
Howdy.
And we have a substitute, a guest speaker. We're very happy to have Vanessa Coleman from our San Antonio office. Made it very last minute. Welcome, Vanessa.
Good afternoon.
Before we get started, I just want to go over a few housekeeping items. If you have any questions, please send them through your chat tab on the GoToWebinar window. If we don't get to your question, I will make sure that Nick and Vanessa sees them, and we'll get an answer to you as soon as possible. We are recording this webinar, and it will be available to rewatch on our website soon, probably this afternoon. But don't keep it to that, Nick. So, and along with the slides, we will send you an email with the link when they're made available. So we have a lot of information to get to. So who am I sending this to? Who's going first?
Well, introduction-wise, Vanessa.
Okay, so just remember, keep the microphone close because I can't. There you go. I know it's very awkward. So Vanessa is our senior consultant in our San Antonio office. She is a bachelor's in engineering, civil and environmental engineering from the University of Detroit Mercy. She has over 10 years of experience in EHS compliance by the way of Exide Technologies and Trinity Industries. And she's been with us for 1 year. Has it only been 1 year?
One blissful year.
But we've done a lot of work with Vanessa.
A lot of work.
Yes, okay. And UDM, what is UDM? University of Detroit Mercy Titans. Do they have a football team? Or
we do not.
Curling?
Basketball.
All right.
Yeah.
Very good. Go Titans. Nick is our CSP, Certified Safety Professional. I could have really had some fun with that, by the way. But he is our North Texas EHS Compliance Division Manager. He has a BS in biology from the Texas A&M University. He is an Aggie.
Yeah, we have a football team and sometimes have a basketball team.
Barely, yeah. He has a master's in public health from A&M, and he's 12 years with W&M.
Yeah, I'm an old man.
Yes, you are. So I'm just teasing. So, okay. So this is our agenda, so I'm going to turn it over to you guys.
Sure. So there's a lot of information in these slides, and Lance touched on this earlier. But one of the things that we want to touch base with first and foremost is you'll see the logos change. W&M was bought out beginning of October, late September, and we are now a division of Braun Intertech. So we went from a company of about 55 to 60 people to anywhere between 1,000 and 1,100 people pretty much overnight. So we'll get more into that in a little bit, but that's first and foremost, that's probably the first thing you notice when you see these slides. The agenda is pretty simple. We're going to take a look at all of the March reporting deadlines that you have coming up. So everything from the annual waste summary, the Tier 2 report, the Stormwater MSGP benchmark and DMR reporting, and then we'll delve into the air emissions inventory as well. And we'll follow up later on in March with the TRI and P2 and APR report.
Yeah. And we have taken some of the reports off because like is it TRI or is that?
Yeah, so that's the to be continued.
Okay, yeah, that's going to be in. Did you already say this? I'm not really listening.
4 seconds.
I'm really not paying attention. I'm doing more than one thing, so sorry about that.
All right, so we wanted to put this slide in there kind of in jest, and this will probably change over the next couple of years as we get more and more involved with the bronze belt of states and stuff like that. But Texas or W&M has been a Texas-centric company for a while. We were born in Texas, raised in Texas, work mostly with Texas clients, but we do have facilities all over the United States. So if you have questions, feel free to let us know. We may not be able to get to them on the air, but we can certainly help you answer any questions you have off air. So most of the content of this will be either EPA-based or Texas-specific-based, but we can help you out if you're not Texas as well. So just as a little summary of the due dates, the first one technically has already passed, but I don't know that many people that submit their annual waste summary on January 25th by paper. Most people don't do that anymore. They wait until March 1st and submit it last year's. Also on March 1st is the Tier 2 report, and we'll get into some of the details and all that kind of stuff. But the first deadline we're coming up against is March 1st, and then you get a little bit of a respite, and then you've got 2 more deadlines, being the Stormwater MSGP reporting and your emissions inventory on March 31st.
And just to clarify the dates for the March 31st days, March 31st is a Sunday, so reporting would be Monday, April 1st. So we'll make a quick change to that slide to go out.
So that little bar there is just indicating that we'll come back to the TRI and the pollution prevention APR. I think Lance said something about that earlier. Is that right? Did you cover that earlier?
Very fun.
Those will be on March. So we're going to kick things off with the annual waste summary. This is one of those reports that it doesn't, under most circumstances, it doesn't take a whole lot of time to perform and get submitted. However, depending on your facility, depending on how much waste you have, it can certainly take a while and it can certainly be confusing. So you'll hear us say this over and over and over again throughout this training. You want to get an early start on these things. We bumped up this training or this webinar from last year. We did it in early February last year. We bumped it to close to the end of January. But we're also, making it a little bit more specified and a little bit easier to follow this year. But you want to get a good start on these things. So first thing you want to do is determine whether or not you have to submit an annual summary. If you're a small or large quantity generator, you have to report. And basically that means, are you generating more than 220 pounds of hazardous waste in a month, or more than 2.2 pounds of acutely hazardous waste? There aren't that many facilities that generate acutely hazardous waste, at least in my client list. However, there are some, so I wanted to throw that in there as well. But if you are a large or small quantity generator, you generate more than 2,000 pounds of Class 1 non-hazardous waste, or you stored more than or more than 2,200 pounds of hazardous waste on your site, then you have to report.
And this is if you exceeded a small quantity at any point within the year.
Right.
So if you were a very small quantity or conditionally, what did they change to?
In TCQ, you're still conditionally exempt until they adopt the new rules in TCQ, and then you'll be a very small quantity generator.
But if at any point, if you reach small quantity generator status, you will still have to report, even if it was only for a blip in time.
Right.
One month or 2 months, you still have to report for that.
Yeah, with those new rules, there will be some exceptions to that. It goes into the episodic generation a little bit better. It allows for more planned episodic generation, but you also have to document that and that kind of stuff. So that will be coming down. It hasn't been adopted by TCQ yet. So, one important thing to note here also is that even if you don't have an annual waste summary to submit, or you don't have information to put on the annual waste summary, you still have to submit it saying that you don't have an annual waste summary to report. So if you generated all Class 1 non-hazardous waste, but it all went off for recycling, then you would have an annual waste summary that said, we don't have anything to report, but you still have to report that form. So data collection on this one, this is probably the easiest one to gather data for. Mainly because you don't have to go out and take samples like you do in Stormwater. Otherwise, that might be the easiest one to get data collection for. But you want to gather up all your waste manifests. It's recommended that you enter your manifests whenever you get them back from the facility, or even heck, before they leave the facility. You get your generator copy and you enter them into the APF in the steers. If you do it all along the way, it goes a lot smoother, it goes a lot easier. You're looking at the manifest, so you'll be able to see if there are discrepancies that you might not identify until later on if you wait to do this exercise later. One thing that you'll want to make sure that your TSDFs are doing is making sure that they enter their system type codes, their handling codes, in line 19 of the manifest. I can't tell you how many times we're trying to finish annual summary, and we get to that last little box and saying how are they handling it, and then we have to call the landfill or wherever they discharge or wherever they disposed of it, and have to figure out how they got rid of that waste. And sometimes you get lucky and you get that first person, that right person to call. Sometimes you get them the first try, and sometimes you don't. So make sure they're doing that all along the way. Another thing that you'll want to do, by the letter of the law, you're supposed to do a year-end inventory and include that into your calculations. We'll go over the calculation in a second, but technically you're supposed to do a year-end inventory and include that into your calculations. The prior year's annual waste summary, a lot of times that's a good resource. If you have questions on, okay, we sent this to this level last time, sometimes you can kind of compare and contrast and see how they got rid of the wastes in a last case scenario or worst case scenario if you can't get hold of them. And then another good resource to have, I know Safety Clean does this, I know Green Planet does this, but what they can do is they can give you a summary of your waste for the year. And what that does is it will say, okay, you shipped off this many pounds of this waste and it was on these dates. So it's even faster than going through your annual waste or through your manifest. Now you still want to double check it. There could be, fat finger mistakes, or they've gone too far, or they haven't included a shipment on accident. So you'll want to cross-reference it. But that's a good resource. It's a quick resource, and it can be very valuable. But just as important as knowing what you have to report in an annual waste summary, it's important to know what you don't have to report in an annual waste summary. Universal waste is not reported on your annual waste summary. Same thing with used oil and used oil filters that are recycled. If you are getting your used oil and you're still shipping it to a landfill or whatever it is, but not recycling it, that still needs to go on your annual waste summary. Same thing with Class 1 non-hazardous waste. If it's recycled, you don't have to include it on the annual waste summary. So there's that incentive there to find the responsible way to get rid of your waste, to ship it to a facility that can recycle it instead of injecting it into a well or whatever it is that you like it. So, and then there's a couple other exclusions that you don't have to include in the annual waste summary. They're not as familiar, they're not as common. So, a non-industrial generator, such as a scrap metal facility, they're shipping stuff off of their facility all the time, but it's not really an industrial activity. It's not an industrial waste to get a recycling if they're sending it off to a smelter, that kind of stuff. So that doesn't count as an annual summary. But other wastes at that facility might, and so you'll want to take a look at the Appendix D. And then same thing, there's certain wastewaters that aren't reportable on your annual waste summary. So depending on what your system is, how it's set up, what your treatment system is, it may not qualify to be submitted on your annual waste summary. So check that out, that Appendix B. So this is the formula we were talking about earlier, and this is what on steers. This is that last screen that you get before you start doing your certification. It talks about how much did you ship for the year. So that will be what you've already put into your APF. If you decide to go through the annual prep file, if you decide to skip the annual prep file and just stick it straight into the annual waste summary tab in steers, you can do that as well. I like using the APF. To me, I like processes. I like knowing that it's going to do the math for me whenever you put the numbers in there correctly. I like that. That's comforting to me. So you put that number in, the amount shipped for that report year, and then you add the amount stored on site at the end of the report year. So that's where you need that end of year. What's the word? Inventory. There you go. I couldn't think of it. And then you subtract out the amount that was stored at the end of the previous year. So ideally, you're doing this at the end of every year. And a good practice to get in the habit of is at the end of every year, as close to the end of the year, have your waste recyclers or whoever it is, your vendor, do a mass disposal of your waste towards the end of the year, so your waste on site is very minimal. So. Another thing that is a consideration when you're doing your annual waste summary, whenever you're adding up your amount generated, you do not include the portion that has been recycled. Again, Class 1 non-hazardous waste is not reportable on your annual waste summary, but if you haven't recycled it yet, it counts. So if you have a Class 1 waste that will be recycled, but it's still stored on your site at the end of the year, that goes towards your inventory. Reporting tips. again, I'll say this a million times, or we'll say this a million times, get started early. Make sure that you have all the information you need. You're reviewing your manifest so that you have any discrepancies worked out before February 28th, that kind of thing. So make sure that you're taking a look at your manifests. Some common mistakes are not reporting wastes on site at the end of the year. Not doing that annual inventory is something that people often don't do. We always recommend it as part of the regulation that you do that. You include that in your invoice summary. But I also know that there's a lot of people that don't end up doing that. So, and then just realize that because you're not taking into consideration some of the waste that you've already recycled, or it's a universal waste, whatever it is, that total quantity generated does not always equal the total quantity shipped. So that there can be a discrepancy in those numbers, and that's okay as long as you have a defense for it and you have a procedure in there to make sure your numbers are correct. So as a resource, the RG-151 is a very good document. It's by most standards, the TCQ document is pretty concise, so that's a benefit. So that's a good resource that we have for the invoice summary. So jumping ships now to Tier 2. The Tier 2 report is a report that is mainly for the use of emergency responders whenever if there were to be an emergency at your facility. So the idea is if a firefighter were to respond to your facility and they're responding to a fire, an explosion, whatever it is, they would have an idea of what kind of harm they're getting themselves into. The general rule of thumb is if you have a chemical stored on site that is considered a hazardous waste, and hazardous chemical, we'll go over the definition of more than 10,000 pounds, that's generally your cutoff. However, there's a subclass called extremely hazardous substances, EHSs, that the threshold for reporting is a lot lower. It's either 500 pounds or the threshold planning quantity, whichever is lower. So it's something like sulfuric acid, that's in lead acid batteries. Sulfuric acid has a TPQ of 500 pounds, and so that is the reporting threshold for that chemical. And you look at that, you look at the inventory for a Tier 2 based on what is stored on site. It's different than the TRI, which we'll cover during the next webinar, but it's different than the TRI because TRI looks at throughput. The Tier 2 looks at what is stored on your site at any given time. So that's the main difference. As far as the definition of a hazardous chemical, the general rule of thumb that we use here at WNM is if there's an SDS for it, and there is a statement on there, unless there is a statement on that SDS that says this is not a hazardous chemical, then you have to take into consideration.
Should be evaluated.
Right. So, and just because it has an SDS doesn't mean it has to be necessarily reported. It can have all zeros in your hazard classification, and if that's the case, it wouldn't be reportable. And same thing, if there's a statement on there that says this is not a hazardous chemical by definition of 29 CFR, yada, 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 then it wouldn't be reported. But there aren't that many chemicals out there that have all zeros in the classification or have that statement. So generally speaking, there's a hazard in most chemicals. I mean, even toothpaste has a 1 in one of those categories. So if you have 10,000 pounds of toothpaste,
well, how else are you going to fight the chemical creeps?
That's right. So, and then as far as the EHS list, there's a very specific list. If you are to look at the EHS list, know that it's in alphabetical order, and it's also by the chemical, the CAS number. And I recommend looking at the CAS number because if you've taken any chemistry classes in your lifetime, you know that ethylene is the same thing as ethene, is the same as, you can have a ton of synonyms, like Vanessa said, and it's much easier to look by the CAS number, and that way all of those synonyms have the same CAS number, and you can't miss it that way. So, reporting mixtures, the main difference here is if you have an EHS in your mixture or if you don't. So if you have an EHS in your mixture, you need to look at the component portion of that mixture to determine whether or not your EHS meets that threshold. So if you have a chemical that's 3% sulfuric acid or whatever it is, and you have 500 pounds of it, you wouldn't exceed that limit for sulfuric acid because it's only 3% of 500 pounds. But if you had 50,000 pounds of sulfuric acid and 3% of the chemical and 3% of sulfuric acid, you would blow that 500 pound limit. Now, if it's not an EHS chemical, as in scenario 2 here, you can do either or. You can either look at it at a chemical component level, or you can look at it as the total quantity of the mixture. The TCEQ doesn't necessarily care which way you go if it's not an EHS chemical, but they want you to be consistent in your reporting. So if you look at the total amount of a mixture on site for one chemical, because it's less than 10,000 pounds, but you've got another chemical that you have 100,000 pounds of, and you look at the chemical component mixture of that, that's kind of picking and choosing. And so do it one way or the other, just be consistent is their request. So common reporting exemptions, again, if the SDS or the MSDS specifically says this is not a hazardous chemical and is not reportable under section 311, 312 of EPCRA, then it doesn't get evaluated for tier 2 reporting. Hazardous waste or radioactive waste doesn't get included. To me, that's always been a weird one to me. If I were a firefighter, I would like to know if there was hazardous waste on site or if there was radioactive waste and where it was, but it's not reportable. Any food additive, color additive, drug, or cosmetic regulated by the FDA isn't involved in tier 2 reporting. They have their own guidelines, they have their own reporting, and generally speaking, it's a little bit more specific. Yeah, it's more stringent than the tier 2 and what gets reported and who gets reported to. So solids such as bar stock or a large plate of titanium does not necessarily need to be reported on tier 2. At that point, the hazard is if you're touching it and there's no real risk of ingestion or inhalation or anything like that. Now, if you do have 10,000 pounds of a dust or you have 10,000 pounds of a molten metal, then that does get included in your tier 2. So if you're a smelter or you're doing a whole lot of grinding, something like that, then yes, it does get evaluated in tier 2. Articles, something that is defined by the shape of the item doesn't necessarily get included in a tier 2. So if you've got a whole warehouse of doorknobs where the specific use of that doorknob is to open doors in this shape and they're already made and it's used for opening doors and it's already a complete object, and those doorknobs don't get included as well. And there are other exemptions. They're a little less common, but I've linked them there. You can pull them up, and it's a nice little 1.5-page document that talks about some of their exemptions. So there's been a bunch of changes over the past couple of years as far as the tier 2 program. The main one this year is that you at least in Texas, going back to being Texas centric, at least in Texas, you don't submit using tier 2 submit anymore. You don't have to download the software. You don't have to download last year's software if you've already gotten rid of it to upload the new one, like that. You have to log in, sign up for an account, gain access to your facility on Steers, and it's a new process that started this year. It was supposed to be in place 2 years ago, I think, and then Hurricane Katrina happened. We had to, TCQ had to reallocate resources and funds and time and money more than anything to helping with that, which they should have. That's life and death versus tier 2 reporting. So there was that. So that goes into effect this year, and that's been the discussion that as the TCQ has gone around and done tier 2 trainings, that's the one where everyone's getting kind of hung up on. It's a lot of back and forth between your client and your consultants potentially. So that's where most of the changes come. And we'll go over that in a little bit of detail. The TCQ has put together a really thorough guidance document. It's kind of cumbersome when you first look at it, but it's very detailed and it's helped us out tremendously. So I suggest if you're going to be working on tier 2, you should download the document. Another couple things, the RN, your registration number, your customer number, and TXT2 numbers are all required now to submit the Tier 2 report. There is an expedited Tier 2 core data form in Steers. You log in, you complete it, and it goes directly to the Tier 2 team, and they can help you out and get those numbers sorted out. Another thing that's changed here is that there can only be one TXT2 number for a CN. And so in the past, we've had facilities that have had one company name, but 8 sites, and they've had different TXT2 numbers, so we're going to have to go back through and make sure we get those worked out. The TCQ is also requesting more detail on storage locations. Last year, there was some discussion about whether or not they were going to make maps required or not. Last year, they said they're not 100% required, but we definitely recommend it. This year, same thing. They would prefer it if you had a map, but if you aren't going to provide a map, let's make sure we give a lot of detail. I've got to talk about that later. So, and then the main thing here on the billing contact, if you've got a bunch of different sites but you're all reporting under one CN, they want to have one billing contact for that CN instead of 3 or 4, like one for each site. They want one for each CN. So we talked about this. This is the main change. You have to go in and you have to log into Steers. So if you're a facility and your boss doesn't have a Steers account, they're going to have to make one. If you're a consultant and you are working on a facility's Tier 2, we will have to have the client set up a Tier 2 or a Steers account, register under the Tier 2 program, give us access to their facility. There's no such thing as a preparer role like there are in other programs in Steers. So the Tier 2 program doesn't have that preparer role where we could go in and prepare it knowing that we can't submit it, and then the client could go back later and submit it. Now we have to be granted authority to be able to work on their Tier 2. So that goes if you are filling it out as a facility. If like say you're the HS manager and your boss is going to be the one signing it, they're going to have to sign up as the designated authority or the owner operator and the signature authority, and then give you access so that you can work on it, and then you'll sign it later on. So this is the link to the user guide. Again, it's like 215 pages, but it is very good. They did a good job laying out. If this is your scenario, if you don't have a Steers account, follow this procedure. If you have a Steers account, follow this procedure, and they do a really good job of walking you through it. One of the things here, if you have a Steers account already, you'll know this, but you'll end up signing your Steers participation agreement about 15 times sometimes. Every time I add a new facility, I've got to sign my SPA, and as you're adding new people to your facility, or you're adding new facilities to your Steers account, or adding new programs to your Steers account, you'll have to sign that SPA. So if you're getting to a point and you're stuck and you don't know what to do, your information, and go up to your account and say, e-sign SPA if you're in Texas and you have a valid Texas driver's license. And most of the time that will cure all your problems. Sometimes it doesn't, but most of the time it will. So I think this is, there we go. So was that the next one? Okay, yeah. So one thing here that you'll notice here whenever you sign up for your Steers account for Tier 2s, you'll notice that you have to gain access by your CN number. So if you're a consultant and you're trying to get into a facility's site in their Tier 2 program, if they aren't super duper familiar with their CN number, send them an email saying, hey, you'll need to sign up for Steers. Here's your CN account. Give me a holler if you have any questions type thing. We've had to do that, and we've had it for the book so far. So, and this goes back to you needing to get access to the Tier 2 database. If you're not the owner operator, you're going to have to ask them or you're going to have to request access to that CN number, and they're going to have to log in and sign in and say, yes, I give Nick Foreman or Vanessa, whoever it is, access to access my TRI or Tier 2. Sorry. So the main data collection that you need for a Tier 2 report is your SDSs and your chemical inventory that's on site. It's always better to ask for this earlier. Like I said, start early. Get your procurement team, whoever it is that you need to talk to, make sure that you get them on board early. Let them know specifically what you're looking for. Let them know specifically that you're looking at what's stored on site, as opposed to how much did you go through last year. It's very important. Now, what stinks about that is in 2 or 3 months when you start working on your TRI, you'll ask them for the throughput, and they'll go, well, I thought I just gave that to you. And then you're like, no, that was just storage, and then there's that back and forth. But so if you aren't in the reporting world, it can be frustrating getting asked for information that's so similar. But make sure that you're very specific with what you're asking for. As far as tips go, it's the DCQ puts an LEPC guidance document out, or a roster of LEPC contacts, and it tells you what they or how they prefer the report be filed with them. Remembering that you have to file the Tier 2 with the TCQ, which the new steers program fulfills, and then you have to report to the local emergency planning committee and the local fire department. There are links on the Tier 2 webpage that says here are all the LEPC contacts for every county and how they like it. But we've learned over the past couple of years that's not always 100% up to date, 99% up to date, but there's always that one county that has changes. So we always call ahead and make sure that they are still confirming that they want it mailed to them or emailed to them. Most of the time they want an email, the electronic copy, but confirm that with them.
Hey, Nick, real quick.
Sure.
Expand on your data collection and reporting tips. It's more of a data collection tip. Back to the point you made about getting with the procurement team. The more involved you get with reporting and your program, and say you already have an established program and you want to just do maintenance versus waiting to the last minute every year to scramble and go and get all this information, is involve your procurement team. Tell them what you're looking for. So as they order material, let them know, like, here's the list I'm typically looking at, and it's something as you're ordering, just send me a ping. Hey, this was on order. So if you see that quantity changes, so instead of having just 2 drums, all of a sudden you're ordering 6 drums. You right away know once you see that ping come through, and you update your spreadsheet or whatever tracking document you have to track your material. And that way you're updating as it goes along versus wait till last minute and harassing your purchasing department. Okay, I need this report right away. And that way it gets them more involved in it. If you don't have an existing, quote unquote, environmental culture, this starts to get more people involved and knows, what to look out for, what you're doing. And so you're not, like I said, last minute trying to harassing them to get you that information.
True.
And you get more people on board, right? You kind of spread the love when it comes to the reporting.
Yes. Take a little bit of that responsibility out.
Awesome. Exactly.
So go back just for 1 second. This is something that we started doing a long time ago at WNM, and it has helped us out with our documentation for Tier 2s. Granted, you won't be sending an email to the TCQ anymore. That will be fulfilled with the steers program. But whenever you submit to the LEPC, make sure you identify your TXT2 number up front, and you label your email with the facility name, RY 2018, Tier 2 report, and then we put on the side LEPC or fire department, so that whenever you're going back and building your documentation later, or you're inspected, you can pull up the email, and this is the one to the LEPC, and this is the one to the fire department, and then make sure that you get a read receipt from them as well, so that you can document, I did this, it's there, he read it, or at least a delivery receipt saying it didn't bounce back. So,
and for the smaller municipalities or regions, those delivery mail, the little green slips.
Yeah. Delivery receipts?
I guess, yeah. Those are super important. Those are important.
Sure.
Scan those in, file them in your file, but also scan them. And if you're saving those somewhere, wherever all that other material is housed, save it there. Very important. You have to show the trail that was delivered.
Sure. Yep. So when you're looking at your Tier 2 report, or when you're looking at your inventory, there's some chemicals are very easy to identify. If you know you have 15 10,000 pound or 10,000 gallon even pits that have metal cutting solution in them, then you know you're going to have to report that, right? But the smaller amounts add up. So if you don't know exactly what your inventory is, and you have a lot of small dosages, there you go, here and there throughout the facility, then you need to add all those up. where they sneak up on people is something like lead acid batteries. Now, the TCEQ isn't necessarily worried about your normal commercially available car batteries. Every car has a car battery. They know that. Every firefighter knows that. They're more looking at the industrial fork trucks batteries, something that weighs 2,200 pounds, 2,700 pounds, where if you look at the weight of the sulfuric acid in that battery, in one of those batteries, you can have over 500 pounds. So
backup power supply batteries.
right.
Yeah,
If you have a server room,
yeah.
something like that, that's easy to miss when you're going through and looking for your inventory. So make sure that you take a look at those. Batteries have their own guidance document as far as what you report, how you report them. If you don't know the content of the sulfuric acid, you use an 18% assumption according to the TCEQ. It's a lot easier than trying to find the SDS for each individual battery. Sometimes you'll probably end up over-reporting. Sometimes you'll end up under-reporting using the 18% rule of thumb, but it's a whole lot easier than trying to find the SDSs for each battery.
One that I've come across is bulk gases. Bulk
Sure.
gases is one that is often left off or not addressed. And, I mean, a lot of industries have nitrogen,
Yep.
oxygen, argon. I mean, they have, a lot of industries have those, and those are often overlooked.
Yep, I agree. So another thing that's is another common mistake is sometimes you'll submit the report, you're like, yes, I'm done, I don't have to think about this for a whole another year, and then you forget to pay your fee. It's in the the TCEQ ePay system. You can do it right there. It's actually really easy. You don't have to sign up for an account to do that. You just have to give your email address and who you're working for and what site it applies to. So you'll have to put in the CN number, TXT number, that kind of stuff. But you don't have to sign up for an account to do that. And then as far as what you owe, there's a fee calculator that's on the TCEQ's website. It's very valuable. It takes a look at industrial facilities versus non-industrial facilities and how much you owe. So, and then there's another document there that covers some more mistakes as well. And more resources. So the TCEQ's website has done a very good job of consolidating information as much as they can to make it easy on you to get the information that you need. So they've got the LEPC list, which I mentioned earlier, and they also link the Texas fire departments. I know particularly in West Texas, whenever you have a volunteer fire department and there's one of them per county or whatever, you can have a very hard time getting hold of them. This gives out email addresses so you can harass them that way if they're not responding to calls, that kind of stuff. It's very valuable. So this is going to swap over to the stormwater, the benchmark, and the discharge monitoring reports. So if you have a MSGP, the multi-sector general permit for your facility, and you have sector-specific benchmark requirements, or you have sector-specific numeric effluent limits, this applies to you. And then everyone, unless you have a hazardous metals waiver for your facility, everyone has the annual hazardous metals requirement as part of the MSGP. So under most circumstances, you'll at least be submitting the DMR, and if you have benchmark requirements, you'll have to submit that as well. The benchmark report, this looks at your sector will have a certain set of chemicals that has that you are required to sample for if you have sector-specific requirements, and it'll tell you you have to take semi-annual samples. So one sample from January to June and one sample from July to December, and you report those numbers on the benchmark form, and then you also report the annual average. So it takes a look at all of your outfalls all across the site. You don't do one of these forms for each outfall. You just do it once for the entire site. So to me, the easiest thing to do here is open up an Excel spreadsheet. For our clients, we have a spreadsheet that we track all of their data, so we can see if they're trending up or down, and we can use that to help them with their reporting. So even if you didn't get benchmark samples, we know that you have to submit a benchmark report saying there's no discharge and that we did not get a sample with an explanation of why. So fill out your rain gauge log. As far as the DMR, I want to throw a mad assist to Joy Schultz with TCEQ, the Small Business and Local Government Assistance. She saw that we were doing this presentation and she said, hey, I want to throw this out there. The net DMR process is still good for those 7 sectors there that have to do their numeric effluent limitations every month according to their sector, but you can't report the hazardous metals exceedances with net DMR yet. It's not quite ready yet. And so you'll still need to submit your hazardous metals DMRs by paper, or you can call the Stormwater team and they can manually put the data in. But for right now, you can't use the net DMR to submit your hazardous metals exceedances. So again, this is one of those forms you submit one for the site, you don't do one for each outfall, and it looks at the maximum amount that was recorded for the year. So to do these reports, the main thing that you'll need is your numeric effluent limitations for your benchmark live reports, and then you'll compare those to whatever the standards are. If it's a benchmark report, you'll compare it to the benchmark levels. If it's your hazardous metals, you compare it to the numeric effluent limitations, and then you will compare the two, put it on the form, and then you'll have to submit that as well. And so if you have a table or a spreadsheet that tracks those, that's the easiest way to do it. You can do an if-then statement, and it pops it out. It's nice and easy. So you want to keep your benchmark and DMRs on site for 3 years. One thing to notice, a benchmark report gets submitted to the TCQ even if you don't have exceedances, and it gets reported even if you don't get samples. The DMR only gets submitted for hazardous metals exceedances if you have an exceedance. So if you don't have an exceedance of your annual hazardous metals limits, then you sign the copy of the form and maintain it on site if you want to. Common mistakes. I know particularly some analytes like Mercury, they will report in micrograms per liter. So there have been times I've been QA/QCing one, something like that, and I'm like, man, that is crazy high. That can't be right. And then I look back at the units, and there's been a multiplier of 1,000. So that's a big one. The benchmark and the DMR, actually the DMR doesn't have at least as far as I know, doesn't have a specific guidance that's been updated recently, but the benchmark report guidance is fairly up to date, and it's a good document. It goes through a lot of different examples, and in both cases, benchmark and DMR, you just look at the one for each site, not one for each outfall. So those are the common mistakes with benchmark and DMRs. So those are some nice little guidances for you.
All right, skipping over to air emissions inventory. So you are required to report if you are a major facility, if your site is located in an ozone non-attainment area emitting a minimum of 10 tons per year of VOCs, 25 tons per year of NOx, or 100 tons per year of any other contaminants subject to NATS. A quick note for reporting year 2018, Bexar County is now classified as marginally under the 2015 ozone standards. So they will have to report, or you will have to report if your facility emits those 10 tons of VOC, 25 of NOx, and 100 of any other contaminant subject to a NATS. So that's new. You have to report also if you emit 0.5 tons per year of lead, emit or have potential to emit 100 tons per year of any more of a contaminant, except for greenhouse gases, and emit potentially to emit 10 tons of any single HAP or 25 tons of the aggregate HAPs, as well as if you have a special inventory request from TCEQ. So there's two forms of special inventory requests. One is you get an actual written inventory request from TCEQ. You'll have to report your emissions. And also for this year, there are several counties listed as needing to report, and that is Bastrop, Bell, Caldwell, Comal, El Paso, Gregg, Guadalupe, Hardin, Harrison, Hayes, and the list goes on. So we will update the slide.
That is a lot of numbers and a lot of counties.
We will include an updated slide listing those counties that are required to report if they emit more than 10 tons of VOCs, 25 tons of NOx, or 100 tons of, actually no, it's just the 10 tons of VOCs and 25 of NOx you will be required to report this year. Oh, and just again, clarifying, the report is due April 1st on that day, so we'll update that slide as well. Data collection. So first and foremost, always use site-specific data if available. That will always be preferred over any default values that come from AP42. So any stack tests or any other monitoring data is preferred. Any production, chemical usage, and or throughput data, applicable equipment and or pollution control device specifications is needed to compile your report. Applicable emission factors, as I mentioned, AP42, and associated calculations. Quick thing to note about AP42 when it comes to liquid storage. The EPA is currently proposing changes to AP42 Chapter 7. If finalized, the current version of tanks will not be an acceptable emissions determination for the future. As EPA is no longer supporting or updating the tanks data software program. So I know for a couple of clients that we've done some recent permitting for, we've put together a tanks calculator for them, and not as sophisticated as a tanks program, as it's so specific to your certain type of tank construction and material was storing. So if you need help with that, definitely let us know, as the tanks was pretty heavily relied upon and it's no longer being supported. Fugitive emission estimates, you'll need to have that on hand as you're doing your report or preparing your, getting your data together. Any SDSs and or other vendor data and emission events for the prior year of 2018. So some common reporting tips and common mistakes is the EI structure. Before preparing your initial EI structure, make sure you have accurately identified and mapped your sources. This is always can get confusing if it's not mapped properly, mostly because you can't really modify the structure in STEERS. You have to go through the agency to make any modifications once it's in there. So you want to, if you're doing this for the first time, really pay special attention and map FINs to EPNs to CINs. Also, the naming conventions typically cannot change. Collective sources, TCQ really encourages grouping of similar small emission sources such as engines or just let me comes off boilers, that type of equipment. They really prefer that those are grouped. Annual emissions for a source include routine authorized operations and maintenance, so MSS, and do not include emission events or non-authorized scheduled MSS, as these are reported separately. A couple more reporting tips and common mistakes. Speciating emissions. Oftentimes people forget that we have to speciate VOCs. Know the specific requirements based on your geographical location and emission. So again, VOCs, a lot of times, depending on your location, it has to be speciated. Natural gas is one of the ones that has to be speciated. And select the most accurate contaminant code. Confidential information. A lot of people don't realize that you can, in fact, mark your information as confidential. However, there's a little more management that goes into that. You have to send all confidential information via certified mail, as you do not submit this with us in STEERS, nor can you submit via email. And clearly label each page or compact disc or however you're submitting this information USB as confidential. Emission data cannot be confidential, but your reporting structure or any other information that's necessary to that's derived for your emissions can be marked as confidential. So oftentimes, or not oftentimes, a few times it's happened to me at least, our clients forget or our facilities forget to report the ozone season emissions. So if you see that little map of Texas to the right, that line, that 100-degree longitude line, if you're to the right of that or to the east of that, you have to report ozone season emissions, and as well as El Paso. has to report ozone season emissions. And that formula is provided right there below. So you're looking at, so ozone season is considered May 1st through September 30th. So you're taking the routine emissions that are generated for the year, dividing that by 153 days. It entails the ozone season, and you get your emissions, your average ozone season emissions. And that is, in parts per day. Yeah, parts per day. Sorry. Yeah, because it's 500 days. Sorry. A complete emissions inventory includes the EI submission via STEERS, sample calculations, summary test results for staff test data if you are using it, summary of relative accurate test audit sheets if using your SEMS or PEMS data, and a signed certification statement by a responsible official. You will have to submit a hard copy again if you are marking any of this information as confidential. So here are some really great resources. TCQ puts together some really good resources. I believe they also have a training scheduled for the 20th. What's today?
We trumped them today.
Oh, okay. Yeah, they have a really good, I think it's on site though, really good training. They put together a training, and they also publish their slides that is using the training on their website. So please go visit their site if you need some more guidance and information. Oh, jump back real quick on the submit authority. So if you are a Title V facility, ROs and DARs are the only ones that are able to submit. So if you are submitting this for the first time, or you've had some changeover in your facility, make sure that they are signed up with a STEERS account and ready to go so that they can be the ones to submit. It's only an RO or DAR is able to submit. If you're a non-Title V facility, a company manager or personnel with authority to represent the RN can submit. Consultants or other third parties are not allowed to submit on your behalf.
So thank you, Vanessa. We've boiled everything down to what we,
nuts and bolts.
Yeah, nuts and bolts. We threw a lot of information at you. Sorry, it was probably more us talking at you today than learning what we hope you learned. Sorry, than the interaction that we normally do in our webinars. But we boiled these down to 6 tips that we have for you guys. Don't be late. Know your dates. March 1st is the first deadline. That's for your Tier 2 and your annual summary. March 31st is your benchmarking DMR reports and your air emissions inventory reports, which regulatory-wise, it's still March 31st, but since that falls on a Saturday, you have until April 1st. So tip 2, start early. Make sure you know who your players are, who you need to contact. Contact them earlier. Know if you have to report is tip 3. Tip 4, assemble a good team. You've got a lot on your plate. You're having to do your OSHA logs. You're having to do other reporting. Look at your metrics. Order chemicals. Whatever it is that the other 99 hats that you have every day. So get a good team together that you can trust and depend on. Get you the information reliably.
Spread that accountability around.
That's right. Yeah. So a team of 5 can work faster than a team of 1, a team of 2, that kind of thing. So, and then make sure you read your instructions, you use the guidelines that are available to you, the guidances that are available to you. The TCQ's done a really good job of helping out with this. If you have questions for us, feel free to submit it to the webinar or call Lance, whatever it is, however you get hold of us, email us, and we can help you with that as well. So,
and if you're in the mud during, especially the emissions inventory, because that can get really squirrely, especially if you've had some process changes, new equipment, old equipment, or stuff that's no longer equipment that you got rid of, that can get really squirrely. So if you're in the thick of it and you just need somebody to help, like, hey, what am I supposed to really do here? Shoot us an email, give us a call. We are always available to help.
And then the last thing is, once you have your calculations, once you have your documentation, document some more. Pull back all your emails. Get the Excel spreadsheets that you have, PDF them. Make sure that you still have the Excel file available, that kind of stuff, and then document. Have hard copies online or available. to you, or if you prefer a hard copy, put a binder on your shelf. If you prefer online storage or an e-data storage facility, or not facility, but a management system, make sure you have a complete copy of your full submittal, your full submission, that kind of stuff.
And on another tip, once you're submitted and as you're in the thick of it, take a moment to think about how else can I better improve this process. I know when I was in industry and reporting season came around, it was every time, even though I felt like I had a good program in place, it was running around with my head cut off, like, oh gosh, I need this. I would take a moment to make a note of how else can I better improve this process next time. Is it setting up an automatic report since purchasing is already providing this information? For other people, can you just add a column and then provide this to me on some recurring basis? My manifest, I try to do that on a quarterly basis, updating to ensure I had all the relevant information so I'm not waiting to the end of the year. So just take a kind of moment once that's submitted as well. What could I have done differently to help ease this process that happens every year, this first part of the year? Sure.
We'll put notes in our documentation saying, we got this information from yada, yada, yada. And, even sometimes they prefer to contact by email or they prefer to call.
Right.
So we talked about this earlier. This is just a little bit about WM and then a little bit about WM under Braun Tech. Like I said earlier, WM was born in Texas, derived in Texas people. Almost everyone that works here is from Texas, that kind of stuff. And we have 8 offices throughout the state, adding Lubbock in there, that were strictly WM offices. But under Braun, what you're getting is more resources. You're still going to have the same WM representative that you've always had. That are quality, are what's the word I'm looking for? Sorry, Francis, giving me looks. Our dedication, our kindness, all that kind of stuff. It's still going to be there. We are very much client-driven, customer-driven, and we are there to help you. Under Braun, what this does to WM and what this can do for you is we have a whole lot more resources. We have 1,100 people. We have branches, or Braun has branches that does non-destructive testing. They do CMT, construction materials testing. We have a building sciences group. As you're building a facility and you need someone to inspect your windows or look at your roof, make sure it's not going to leak, anything like that. We have all of these different resources, and we have a whole lot bigger of a footprint now that we can base off of. So the same quality, the same motto, we get projects done, same service, all that kind of stuff. It's still going to be there for you, but we just have a lot more people and a lot bigger footprint. So.
All right. Well, that was very good. Thank you, Nick and Vanessa, for that pictureless webinar. I'm kidding. I like pictures. Thank you. Yes, those were pictures, but it was a lot of great information, and so great job. There's Vanessa's and Nick's contact information if you need to have any questions or if you need help with your reporting. We do have a couple of questions if you have time, and we were looking at the wrong chat. We were looking at the chat tab instead of the questions tab. So can we throw some questions there? And Vanessa, no, giving me dirty looks if it's a hardball question. Sorry. Okay, so do benchmarked DMRs have to be reported online?
No. So benchmarks still submitted by mail to the TCEQ using the benchmark form. And that's, at least as far as I know, isn't scheduled to change anytime soon. The DMR, the discharge monitoring report, that's the one that over the past couple of years they've been trying to take on the net DMR and submit it that way. However, for your hazardous metals exceedances, they're extending the ability to use the paper version one more year until they get the system up and running. If you have questions, I can send you the email that I got, or I can include it in the webinar slides before we send them out. But we got correspondence from the TCQ last week saying they're still not ready for it as far as reporting your hazardous metals exceedances. And you can submit via paper, or you can call the Stormwater team and they will manually enter the data for you.
Okay, one more question. Do we have to submit ozone submissions if we do not qualify for air emission inventory reporting?
Read that to me one more time.
Do we have to submit ozone submissions if we do not qualify for air emission reporting?
No. The ozone is, you're reporting your ozone emissions in the EI reports. If you don't have to report your emissions, then no, you would not report your emissions during the ozone season.
All right, I'm going to see if we have one more question here. Okay, I'm not sure if this is this is a question. Original signatures required from responsible official for TCQ?
Which program? So generally speaking,
who's on file.
Right. So the one who signs the reports, yes, the TCQ prefers the original signature. However, there are some cases where, like in the past, the Tier 2 was submitted online, and so obviously that's going to be an electronic signature. But now, if you are submitting a form to the TCQ, they would prefer it be the original, and you maintain a copy of that signed report in your binder on your shelf, whatever it is.
From the emissions inventory side, if you are a Title V facility, if there's a change, so it's the RO or the DAR that is submitting, they already have their signature on file. If it is different, you do have to submit a change of RO prior to allow this new, or to permit this new RO or DAR to submit electronically.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, well, that concludes all our questions. Thank you for those questions. That was awesome. Our next webinar is going to be next month on February 28th on endangered species. So it's going to be Angelique is going to be giving us a webinar on that. So you can sign up for that on our webinar. If you have any questions on that, you can always contact me or Lydia. We'll be more than happy to help you sign up. But thank you, Nick and Vanessa, for the great information and the great webinar and your time, because I know you guys have been really busy. We promise the next time we have this webinar, we are going to have microphone
stands or something.
Well, no, how to use a microphone.
Training.
Training, yes, because we need to have a webinar on how to do microphones. So we were getting a lot of fading in and outs, and so we'll work on that for next time. So thank you guys for joining us. If you have any other questions, please contact me or Lydia or Vanessa or Nick.
Happy
Thank you guys.
Season.
Okay,
Get going early.
Thank you guys.
Thanks.
Have a great day.